This verb is so very useful in French, and I use it all the time. And even I recommend learners in general keep it simple when they're building up their fluidity, their fluency in their French conversation. However, there are two common problems that I come across. Numéro un is I hear this word pronounced incorrectly tout le temps. And numéro deux is there does come a point where it can get a bit repetitive to use the same subset of language, right? So in this video, I'm going to show you how to pronounce it correctly, first of all, and then how to bring some variety to your French with useful synonyms. And stick around until the end, parce qu'il y aura un petit quiz. Du coup, si vous êtes prêts, allez, c'est parti. Tout d'abord, let's look at the pronunciation. First, for the infinitive form, and then in a few different conjugations, as that's how you're going to use it most of the time. Utiliser. Utiliser. Now, what I hear a lot is an imaginary Y sound at the start of the word. Something like utiliser. Utiliser. Which is completely understandable because in English, we add that sound to use. Use. You see, there's the y. However, as you know, when we conjugate a verb starting with a vowel, with the subject je, it becomes J apostrophe, J apostrophe. It isn't possible to follow that rule if we add the y sound. It has to be je utilise. So that's a clue that something's wrong. If you're seeing the word starts with a vowel, you in this case, but then you know the subject is je, it should be J apostrophe, and you've got to take this pause before you get to the utilise, right? It doesn't flow off the J. Bref, it's j'utilise, j'utilise. Par exemple, j'utilise mon expertise pour vous apprendre la bonne prononciation. Now with the subject tu, it's tu utilises in the present tense. Tu utilises. In everyday spoken French, this often becomes t'utilises, but it's not a grammatically correct form like je te J apostrophe is. However, it's said all the time, so it's worth me mentioning. Now, it can be trickier to make your mouth remember not to add the y when using the passé composé, as one example, because it can feel like it just flows better. J'ai utilisé. J'ai utilisé, right? It sounds like we're adding that y, or we may well be. Naturally, this will flow together and sound like there may be a y there, but there isn't really. Just practice saying the word on its own over and over and over before adding it to a bigger phrase. Okay, so now you know how to pronounce utiliser. Here's a list of alternative verbs that I'm going to go into so you have an idea of when to use them. Utiliser is a very useful verb because it can be applied in so many contexts. Now, some of the following alternatives aren't as versatile, but I'm going to do my best to point that out where necessary. Et vous, les natifs qui nous regardent aujourd'hui pour peut-être pratiquer votre anglais ou chercher la petite bête, merci beaucoup de préciser plus de nuances que j'aurais peut-être raté dans les commentaires ci-dessous. Merci beaucoup. Alors, numéro 1 is se servir de quelque chose. Ou en effet, de quelqu'un. I'd say this one is applicable in most of the cases where utiliser can be used, and I like to use it because it's a pronominal verb. You might know this as a reflexive verb, and I feel more fluent when I use those. I don't know how about you. I'll always remember from an episode of Lupin, he could have asked, vous utilisez ces dossiers-là? But he asks,
vous servez de ces dossiers-là?
Non, vas-y, prends-les.
That's right. Vous vous servez de ces dossiers-là? Voilà un exemple of se servir conjugated with vous. Vous vous servez de ces dossiers-là? Now, if you say se servir de quelqu'un, you're more saying use someone in the sense of taking advantage of them, to leverage them for your own benefit, maybe to exploit them. But you probably won't get into trouble with that one because it's the same connotation with utiliser. Ensuite, we have employer quelque chose. Employer quelque chose. In French, employer quelqu'un is to employ someone. So not a synonym for utiliser. So we're just looking at employer quelque chose, which is a synonym of utiliser. So you can employer something such as une technique or un mot or une fourchette. And like I say, this is basically a direct synonym for the most common uses of utiliser. Voila, nice and easy to just throw in here and there for some variety. And thanks to word reference, we have the example, on emploie une louche pour servir la soupe. On emploie une louche pour servir la soupe. Voilà, employer, to employ, to use. Now, the fact that we know English, this really helps us to know intuitively which synonym to use where. And as you keep learning French, you fill in any other gaps that you might have. So we should really not take English for granted and how much it helps us with French, even though French can be a real chore sometimes. Now, the next verb is appliquer. So you can probably imagine using your English where you'd use apply but not employ in English. And it's the same in French. This is really going to help you choose. So, je veux appliquer la technique que j'ai apprise dans mon cours de français d'hier. Could be, je veux employer. Appliquer une technique, employer une technique. It works. However, j'emploie une louche pour servir la soupe couldn't be said as j'applique une louche. Ça serait louche. All right, you may not have got that bad joke, but you will later on. So that's appliquer, to apply, to use. And we can also say to use as a synonym of to consume in the context of energy, fuel, money, and to some extent time. Ça utilise pas mal d'énergie. Can be said as ça consomme pas mal d'énergie. It consumes a lot of energy. Pas mal de is a lot of. So the verb consommer, consommer, is next on our list for these specific contexts. Reverso Context is a fantastic website and it helped me with this second example. Votre corps consomme 2,5 litres d'eau or 2,5 litres d'eau en climat tempéré. Your body uses 2.5 litres of water in temperate climates, or it consumes. Next up, when talking about modes of transport, you might say in English, I use my bike every day. Now you could say, j'utilise mon vélo tous les jours. You'd be understood, right? But why not say, je me déplace à vélo tous les jours. Je me déplace à vélo tous les jours. The verb se déplacer basically means to get around rather than to use. So this is actually more of a restructuring of the sentence. So it's not a direct equivalent of use, it's just when you would use in English, how you would express that sentence in French would be with a different verb. This verb se déplacer is used for movements where a destination is implied, right? And it's à vélo, à pied, à moto, but en voiture, en train, en bus. And this is because those last ones are vehicles you get into and are covered and protected from the outside. Whereas the first three, à vélo, à pied, à moto, are ones where you are exposed to the elements. This is a rule we use. That's a lesson within a lesson there. But I found that out actually only quite recently. Now the final one on my list is very specific. It's when you want to say, to use this opportunity to blah, blah, blah. In French, we usually know the opportunity from context, so it becomes the pronoun en and goes before the verb profiter. J'en profite pour plus the action. For example, j'en profite pour vous remercier d'avoir regardé cette vidéo. Maybe you could say want to as well. I want to use this opportunity to thank you for watching this video. Memorizing j'en profite pour is a great idea so you don't translate word for word because it will be weird at first to think of take this opportunity, use this opportunity as j'en profite. So just learn it as a block. Oh, and bonus, profiter de quelqu'un can be used to mean to use someone in the sense of to take advantage of someone. Il a profité de moi pour se rapprocher de mon père. He took advantage of me, he used me to get closer to my dad. Maybe if my dad was mega rich and influential, someone would want to use me to get to him. So voilà, it's a bit more context. D'accord? Have you been paying attention throughout the video? Parce que là, c'est parti pour le quiz. Tell me down in the comments how you may avoid using utiliser, not utiliser, but utiliser, in favor of an alternative for these three sentences. Il utilise toujours les mêmes expressions quand il parle français. Je n'utilise plus mon bureau pour écrire. C'est une élève à l'écoute. Elle utilise toutes les techniques que l'on lui apprend. Voilà, j'ai trop hâte de continuer la discussion et de lire vos phrases dans les commentaires ci-dessous. Give the video a thumbs up, s'il vous plaît, if you watched this far. It's totally free and it really helps my videos to be seen by more people. Passez une excellente journée, soirée ou après-midi. Ciao, ciao, French learner.